YouTube, it's Kathy, and this is my weekly entertainment wrap-up for January 30th through February 5th. This week I read 2 books, I watched 6 shows, and I listened to 1 book. First this week I finished my 4th book for the 12th challenge, and that was 11 Thumps and the Gateway to Fu. This one was recommended to me by my friend Katrina, and I've linked their channel down below. This is the first in what I think is a trilogy, and this one was published in 2005. This one is all about a few different characters actually, one of them obviously being 11 Thumps. This is a character who is orphaned shortly after his birth, and then he has to go to live with his mother's half-sister, who refuses to say that she is his aunt. From that you can probably understand that this is not a great living experience and that these people are not great caretakers. Another character we focus on is named Winter. She is about a year younger than Levin, and she also has a parent who's just kind of a jerk, but we know from the beginning that this parent isn't her parent because she was switched at birth, and we don't really understand why, we just know it happened. You see, during the prologue of this book there was a wizard from a different place who came to Earth and tried to hide this thing and then ran away from the bad guys and then ended up dying, and we have to kind of figure out why all of these characters are connected and how. As it turns out, they're all connected to this realm called Fu, which is where all the dreams take place, basically. And of course there's somebody there who wants to destroy Fu, which would just destroy everything, really. Eventually these characters meet some other characters, they find out that they have destinies to fulfill, they've got some powers, and it goes from there. What I want to say in the positive of this is it was very funny and very imaginative, and I very much enjoyed those elements of it. However, every time we got to an adult that the author didn't want you to like because they're mean or whatever, they were also described as being fat, and I was not down with that. I didn't need that to be there. Them being terrible people was enough for me. You didn't also have to give every terrible person this same characteristic, because that's just garbage. Overall though, I really did enjoy this one, so I'm probably going to have to think about doing some more interlibrary loans to read the rest of the series. Moving on, I read my first book for the Rent Readathon, and that was Missing from the Village. This one has a very long subtitle which I didn't write down on my list, but it has something to do with the serial killer Bruce McArthur and the way that the Toronto police system has failed queer people. Look, I understand that Canada is the 2nd biggest country in the world and that it's impossible for me to know every news story from every area. Despite that, I was very shocked to learn that we had a serial killer killing men in Toronto who was only sentenced quite recently. What I really enjoyed about how this book was put together is it not only focused on the victims of this serial killer, it also gave us some context as to how queer people have been treated in Toronto specifically, as well as a little bit across Canada. And it hasn't been good. It hasn't been good. There was one point where it pointed out that in a certain calendar year, I want to say it was in the 80s, the homicide budget for Toronto was like $5 million, and they had like 20 cops or something like that in that task force. However, the operating budget for the morality section was $7.5 million. They had about 200 cops, and they were basically there to shut down bathhouses. They cared more about catching queer people than they cared about catching their murderers. Additionally, it took forces outside of the police to realize that there was a serial killer and even say anything to the effect of there is a serial killer, specifically mostly killing men of color in the village. And then when that was proven, the police chief tried to pin it on the queer community, saying they should have done better when they were literally the only ones looking. Obviously this case made me very, very angry. However, this book was very well written, so if you're interested in true crime, this is one to pick up. On to the shows I watched, which was a lot of them, the first one being all of the first season of Getting Curious with Jonathan Van Ness. There are 6 episodes in this, it's available on Netflix, and I watched them all in one go. They're about a half hour each, and they covered 6 different topics. Let's see if I can remember them. The first one is bugs, the second one was hair, after that, I think the 4th one was snacks, the 3rd one was the binary, the 5th one was figure skating, and the 6th one was skyscrapers. Basically it's just them asking questions of experts, as well as just having random celebrities show up for very small little pieces, and I very much enjoyed that. I enjoy any type of show that just wants to learn about something. I love learning about things, so this was a delight for me. I also watched the world premiere of RuPaul's Drag Race UK versus the World. This is the first time that queens from different franchises of RuPaul's Drag Race have all come together from different nations to compete. If I remember correctly, we have 3 British queens, we have 3 US queens, we have 2 from Canada, 1 from Holland, and 1 from Thailand. Notably, the one from Thailand has never actually competed but has been a judge on the Thailand version. Not only was I going to watch this anyway because I've watched most of these seasons, the only ones I haven't watched are the ones that aren't easily available to me, which is Holland and Thailand. In addition, I have also worked with one of the queens, which is Jimbo. She is local to where I live, and we've done Atomic Vaudeville shows together. So I was actually very happy in this episode that we got the talent show, and she did something I've seen her do before, and it's super weird. I was very happy she brought clowning to the RuPaul stage because it is a very weird skill, and it's something that takes a lot of commitment to do the weird crap that you're going to do. And obviously the internet loved it because there's memes everywhere. However, as soon as I found out that she would have to lip sync, I didn't think it was going to go well, and it didn't. We are using all-star rules on this season, which means the top 2 queens are lip syncing for the win, and then whoever wins has to send home one of the bottom queens. And yeah, this has sparked some conspiracy theories online as to whether or not she threw it or she is just actually that bad a dancer. Maybe we'll find out in future episodes. Either way, I'm excited to continue. I also stay current on this week's episode of RuPaul's Drag Race Season 14. In this episode, they had to create these Save a Queen PSAs, you know, the kind of very sad, like, just give $1 and this queen can buy her makeup for a year, those types of things. And this was especially fun because they split up into 3 teams, and then 3 queens who were eliminated first on their respective seasons came back and were the queens that they were making the video about. The category for the runway was Spring Has Sprung. I really enjoyed some of the interpretations, and I love that they weren't all just floral interpretations, because floral for spring, groundbreaking. It's not me dragging the people that did use floral because it was lovely, but it was great not to see all floral. A show that just dropped on Netflix this week and we immediately watched was Murderville. If you haven't heard of this one before, Will Arnett plays a detective called Terry Seattle. He's working in this police department where his boss is also his ex. There's other people in the department that obviously he interacts with, but then every single episode he is given a detective in training who is played by a celebrity. The big thing about this show is everyone else gets a script except for the celebrity, and then it's up to them to figure out which of the suspects they interview is in fact the killer. This is a lot of fun because one of my favorite things in the world about watching improv is when it's done really, really well, but somebody still cracks. And you see that happening throughout this. Some people are much better than others when it comes to not cracking, and then some people that I thought were going to be great at this just kept losing their shit, and it was really funny to watch. Apparently there is already a 2nd season being talked about, and I am very excited for it. What I also really enjoyed is there was an overarching theme that happened throughout this, and things that you learned about characters in the beginning of the show came back later in the show. I very much enjoyed that continuity. And it was also very fun to try to guess along with the celebrity guest as to who done it. I also watched the 1.5-hour premiere episode of The Gilded Age because my best friend has been begging for me to watch it because you just need somebody to talk to about it. This show is made by the same person that made Downton Abbey, however this one is set in New York in the 1920s and I believe is tangentially related. I want to say it's probably Cora's family or something like that. I don't know for sure, I haven't looked up the connection, and you don't need to know the connection to enjoy it. Basically all you need to know is this is going to be a war between the old money and the new money, and in this you get to see the very fancy rich people as well as their servants, so it has that same flavor as Downton Abbey but with an American accent. Firstly, the costuming and the architecture, because the places where these people live are ridiculous. They are beautiful, but also why? The amount of wealth, and I'm just like, I could never even own a house, let alone a mansion like this, so it's fun to watch because of that, because it's obviously beautiful. Also, Cynthia Nixon is in this, and I guess she just can't be in a show that's not in New York, so that tracks. And after watching that premiere, I'm excited to see more. The last show we watched episodes of this week was Ozark. We watched the 4th and 5th episode of season 4. There's a half season out right now, so there's only up to 7 episodes. We're kind of doing it a little bit slowly, and then eventually when the second half of the season drops, we'll continue to watch it. This is one of those shows where so much happens that you re-meet these different characters that now have to get along, and then you are reminded by the characters that they have had some terrible things happen in their past. And that is interesting to me because a lot of what happened previously I've forgotten, so I'll remember and be like, oh yeah, that happened. That was messed up. I also saw a take on Twitter where one of my friends said that they see Marty Byrde as autistic and nobody can tell them otherwise, and I'm going forward with the show kind of seeing that interpretation. Obviously I can't make a determination one way or the other, but it is an interesting interpretation to look at when you're looking at shows like this. I think the biggest character arc to be watching in this season is Wendy. She is getting very, very dark as time goes on, so it'll be interesting to see how that ends up. The audiobook I listened to this week is Razorblade Tears. The protagonists of this book are two grieving fathers. Both of their sons were murdered. Their sons were also married and had a daughter, so one of them is actually now taking care of that daughter with his wife. And even though their sons were murdered in a gruesome, horrific way, the police don't have any leads and they haven't really tried to solve this case, or at least that's what it feels like. Eventually there is a catalyst that I will not spoil that lights a fire under these two men's asses, and they decide to team up and figure out who killed their sons. Now the thing is, neither of them had a great relationship with each of their sons because their sons were queer and they weren't down with that. However, throughout this they learn more about the queer community, they become more accepting, so that's something. Not to mention that one of these men is black and one of these men is white, and they have a lot of discussions about that. I'm quite certain for this one that I just gave a one-line review on Goodreads, which was something to the effect of, I need this to be adapted into a well-done action movie ASAP. This one obviously has the mystery thriller aspects because we're trying to figure out what happened. We also get to see a little bit of the perspectives of some of the bad guys and kind of behind the scenes, but we don't really know why it happened until really close to the end. And then, like I said, this would make a great action movie because it was an action-packed book, and of course it is full of guns and violence and those types of things. I enjoyed that these fathers had similar backgrounds because each of them has been to prison before, but obviously they have very different backgrounds because I've grown up rather differently. There's even this one scene that I found particularly fantastic as these two men were just driving to their next location, where Buddy Lee, who is the white one, and Ike, who is the black one, are talking about economic circumstances, and Buddy Lee makes some quip about, you seem to be doing pretty well, I'd like to take your truck, and Ike is like, okay, you can take my truck, but you have to take everything that goes with it, such as being stopped on the regular just for driving because I'm black, and then goes on about all these other things that have to do with him having this truck and how people treat him because of it. There are a lot of discussions like this. There were also other parts in the book where the two characters were separated but would be seeing different things through different eyes, and I loved seeing the character growth that they had while trying to solve the murders of their sons. That's it for this week. If you've read, watched, or listened to any of these, let me know about it down in the comments below. On the way down to the comments, if you hit that subscribe button, that would be very nice of you. If you don't feel like leaving a comment but want to make sure that I know you were here, just leave me an emoji or a smiley face if you happen to be on your keyboard. You can like and share this as you see fit, and I will see you very soon. Bye!